First of all, it's an honor to be here today, and I want to thank you for the confidence of your authorization. For 40 years, I've been a civil rights and constitutional lawyer in New York, and I've been committed to certain very basic principles that seem to me entirely congruent with those of your party. In 2017, I was going to run for county executive of Orange County. I had the Democratic Party nomination. But I looked around the field and I thought that on every major issue, I couldn't run as a Democrat. I couldn't run as a Democrat because Mr. Cuomo was essentially, excuse the expression, raping our county environmentally, and was a paragon of public corruption. And I decided that rather than run as a Democrat, at the next available opportunity, I would switch my registration and try to fight against the hegemony of two parties in our state which have disserved our state, radically disserved our state. Now, as an advocate for the last 40 years, I've worked with Mario Cuomo, who was a person you couldn't sit in a room with and talk with. I got $300 million from the state of New York to redo the Yonkers School District as part of the settlement of the school desegregation case I started working on in 1981. I got $100 million to build affordable housing in white neighborhoods of Yonkers, although it took me almost 20 years to do that. I've worked on pioneering cases in sexual harassment. I've worked on major environmental cases in the state, including our current opposition to CPV, the major power plant which was at the root of the corruption trial of Mr. Percoco, the closest aide to Mr. Cuomo. I am prepared not merely to take this fight to power, but to win this race. I have more experience as a trial lawyer and as an appellate lawyer than every candidate of both major parties put together. I've argued in the Supreme Court of the United States major voting rights cases, as well as the Yonkers school desegregation case. I've argued 350 cases in the United States Court of Appeals, making the law with regard to whistleblowers, sexual harassment, and other critical issues. And I am prepared to go to the halls of power in this state on behalf of the people in the state and make every effort to extirpate corruption, which is crippling any faith that people have or can have in our political system. Now, it's not enough to say you want to run for Attorney General, because you have to have a reason to run for Attorney General, and I'm going to give you the reason very explicitly. The Attorney General represents every state agency in New York, 2 minutes. And in representing every state agency in New York, he's represented the state agencies that I've been suing in probably 300 cases in the last 30 years. And in many of those cases, we've challenged blatant racism, blatant sexism. We challenged a promotion system in New York State that didn't let minorities get promoted because of a battery test that had never been validated. I represented 4,700 African American and Hispanic workers in that successful case, getting a $45 million settlement against the state. But the fact is, those cases should never have been defended. The Attorney General of New York should have said to those state agencies, we are not going to defend blatant racism and sexism. Clean your act up. That's the Attorney General's job. Now, right now, I don't have time for your applause, I'm sorry. Right now, what we have is a state attorney general, and I'm talking about Schneiderman and not necessarily Miss Underwood, who understood that the public health and welfare was blatantly compromised by CPV and the fracking infrastructure of New York State, and never picked up a finger to use his office to defend the people of our state. I'm going to take this fight to whatever nominees are in both political parties. Whoever they are. Mario Cuomo's son is picking the nominee in the Democratic Party. That tells you all you need to know about that person. My friends who are Democrats are saying to me, why don't you get the Democratic Party nomination? Because there's no way in the world Andrew Cuomo would ever tolerate it. Not in a million years. And the Republicans have no one. So we have a chance in this race to project Green Party values, as I will do, arduously. Believe me when I say arduously. I've worked 80 hours a week for 40 years, and there's no reason I can't keep doing it. So I want to simply say this. My wife, Lee, is sorry she couldn't hear today. She had brain surgery 10 days ago. She gave her blessing to this race, notwithstanding her medical circumstances. My 7 children are supportive of this race, and some of them are going to work again assiduously to make this happen. This is not a race about a third party or a subordinate party. It's a race about who is the best qualified person to be Attorney General of New York. And I will put my credentials next to anyone and everyone's for that honor. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm ready to go. I would be prepared. You can't simply revoke Goldman Sachs' charter. They deserve due process. It's very important that we as Green Party people recognize due process. They deserve due process, but what the public deserves is a truth-telling process which explicates to everyone in our state why their charter should be revoked. The head of Goldman Sachs was a classmate of mine at law school, so I'm very interested in going after Lloyd. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so.
No, sorry, should I?
I have a list.
Okay, you have a list, I'm sorry.
So it's John, it's John, Barbara, Brian, Adrian, Gil, if we have time.
Yeah, in Troy, we have a district attorney who has been blatantly involved in covering up police killings and brutality. What would you do about situations like
that? The DJ Henry case was a tragic case in which a young man, 19 years old, was shot and killed at Pace University. He was a football player and a star student. His parents were upper middle class people from Massachusetts, and 2 days after the killing, they asked me to represent them in the tragic death of their son. The current head of the New York State Court of Appeals, Janet DeFiore, was the district attorney of Westchester at the time I took that case. And I had a series of meetings with her. And in those meetings with Janet DeFiore, from the very beginning, October of 2010, I said, you can't prosecute this case. You have cozy relationships with every police department in your county. The district attorney depends on police agencies for those cases, every case. So there needs to be in New York a special prosecutor. I started talking about this with the governor in 2010. I met with David Patterson when he was governor, with the Henry family, to advocate for that. There should be no involvement by any local district attorney in any police-related case, period. Not just killings, beatings, brutality, and I've represented people for 40 years in those cases. No involvement. And the reason for that is institutional. It's institutional. It's not because I don't like those local district attorneys. It has nothing to do with that. Their role is to work with local police agencies. That's incompatible with doing proper investigations in the kinds of cases you're taking. I've been on the front line of that issue. I feel deeply about it. I've represented a number of families who've lost children based on police misconduct throughout the state. And again, it's an issue where there are a lot of Johnny-come-latelys. I've been fighting that issue for 20 years in New York, and now we're moving closer to a special prosecutor status. All of those cases are supposed to go to the AG's office, but you don't have an AG who's comfortable and understands those issues. I do because I've prosecuted the cases.
Barbara.
Hi, Michael.
Good day, Barbara.
Good day. Back in 2017, you sent out an email to a big list of people in Orange County, including myself. And in this, you were comparing Obama very favorably to our new president.
That's right. I felt very favorably about Obama compared to Trump.
Right. And so my question is, because I questioned you at the time about that, if you may recall, it seemed that you saw no shortcomings to Obama's policies. And furthermore, you said that you had changed your views about the drone wars given the rise of ISIS, and that you were now supportive of the drone wars. And although I sent you information about civilians who have been killed in the drone wars and gave specific information, you did not change your point of view in any email correspondence with me at that time, which I think was early 2017. There are drone protesters in New York State who've gone to jail because of border protection. So I think this is relevant. Have you changed it?
Let me explain to you something very simple, okay? I feel our generation has a tremendous amount of unfinished business, tremendous amount. I was a CO during the war in Vietnam, and I'm a pacifist, which is totally consistent with your party's principles as I understand them. In my view, however, focusing on drones is, for me, it doesn't need to be for you or anyone else, about the 50th issue out of 60. Okay, that's how I feel about it. Why? Because I believe American foreign policy, as was explained earlier, is fundamentally colonialist and imperialist. I think that foreign policy at its root has to change. I think focusing on a methodology like drones, for me, is frankly a waste of time. It's not the central issue. The central issue is American imperialism, which I am focused on dealing with. Now, with regard to your statements about Mr. Obama, I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Obama in the early 1990s. I think Mr. Obama was a dignified man. I don't agree with everything he said, and I wrote hundreds of posts during his presidency criticizing him. I was in touch with Charles Ogletree at Harvard Law School, my former classmate, who's one of the closest people to Obama from the beginning, and was giving them policy papers on many of the issues I thought needed to be changed. But given his situation, I thought Mr. Obama did a reasonable job as our president. Compared to the current administration, no, there is no comparison. So yes, drones to me are not a fundamental issue. You absolutely state that correctly, and I said that to you at the time.
As Attorney General, will you push for the New York State Joint Commission on Public Ethics to be added to the state constitution?
Yes, but, and let me be very clear about this, I don't think ethics is an add-on. I don't think ethics is an add-on. The most fundamental crisis we have throughout the state, and I've been suing local governments for a long time in New York. I don't have very many friends in local government. Is that there is corruption and a pay-to-play mentality throughout the state, in New York City and everywhere else in the state. That pay-to-play mentality is the same mentality that's leading a very courageous, otherwise courageous woman who is a public advocate of New York, who wants to be the next Attorney General, to tell the very party which first endorsed her for political office, drop dead because Andy Cuomo says, I can't run on your line. That's the kind of public corruption which has many manifestations that needs to be rooted out of this state, period. And you've never had a leader in this state who was willing to go around the state and tell local governments that, and not only tell them that, prosecute those of them who are committing public corruption, because you know something? That's the Attorney General's job. We have a public integrity unit, which has been stripped by the last several budgets, that needs to be elevated in importance, and it needs to be functional, and it will be functional. Sorry, keep my answers shorter, sorry. I will do that.
Adrian.
How would your campaign build the Green Party, and how will you do outreach to the Green?
That's a great question. Since I announced about 2 days ago my candidacy, literally scores of people who are Democrats in my county and who've looked to me over the years for leadership on a wide range of issues have said they're coming to change their registration. And I am going to avidly advocate throughout the Hudson Valley, where I have many, many friends, hundreds and hundreds of clients I've represented, that they change their registration, because it is time to simply say, enough of this crowd. We've given them every chance, it's enough. And what was said earlier by the woman about Bernie Sanders, I applaud what you said. Exactly right. He should have been the nominee. He wasn't the nominee because of corruption, and it filters down everywhere. And people like me, who are lifelong Democrats, have to stand up and say, there is no changing that crowd. We need a new ethos.
Thank you.
Can you comment on the Attorney General's role in the practice of solitary confinement in prisons, and also in forcing parole boards to follow the reforms that have already been passed?
Well, it's interesting. I have someone who's been working with me on criminal justice issues here today. I brought a big case against solitary confinement 2 years ago in the Eastern District of New York in federal court. I'm an avid opponent of solitary confinement, that if I were Attorney General, it would be banned in New York State. Period. Period. Now, and I will go around the state speaking about that issue. For those who don't know much about the parole board, there are factors and criteria that are supposed to be taken into account in making decisions. Very often that's overwhelmed by all sorts of political pressure. Judge Cowick recently of Columbia County issued a courageous decision in which he pushed back against that pressure and released a gentleman after 42 years in confinement who did kill a prisoner but was eligible for parole and probation. So I will strongly support that, okay?
Thank you. And our last question, Cassandra.
What
I'm sorry.
plans do you have to work with the campaign of our gubernatorial candidate?
Very good question. Whatever I can do to collaborate with Howie Hawkins, I will do. I met Howie at the CPV picket a few weeks ago. We had a conversation about this race. There was another candidate then in, and I was just asking about it. He contacted me when he apparently couldn't run, and I'm anxious to work with him. I'm anxious to travel wherever he's traveling and wants me to be. I'm anxious to introduce him. I'm anxious to explain as best I can as a longtime trial lawyer the basic precepts of this party and what he's running on, and let him follow that with the meat, if you will. So whatever you need me to do, I will do. Okay? Thank you all, and I appreciate the chance to address you.